Chapter 19, Self-Discipline and Children. Right discipline exists not in external compulsion, but in habits of mind which lead spontaneously to desirable rather than undesirable activities. Bertrand Russell. You can calculate the value or importance of something you do by measuring the possible consequences of doing or not doing it. Something that is important is something that has significant potential consequences, like jumping out of the path of a speeding car. Bringing children into the world has consequences that can go on for 80 years, which is the average life expectancy of a person today and beyond, into the lives of your grandchildren and great grandchildren. This is why becoming a parent is one of the most important things you will ever do. As an adult, you are still affected today by things that your grandparents did or didn't do to or for your parents. The way you treat your children is strongly influenced by the way your parents treated you. It has consequences that cascade down the generations, and it has an enormous influence on their lifelong happiness and well being. Your greatest responsibility. When you have a child, a high level of self discipline is essential in order to fulfill your commitment and deliver on your responsibility. The day your first child is born, you have taken on a minimum 20-year commitment to do everything possible to raise your child as a happy, healthy, and self confident adult. At every stage of your child's life, your words, actions, non actions, and behaviors are shaping and influencing that child and determining how he or she will turn out as an adult. The greatest need that a child has is for an unbroken flow of unconditional love and acceptance from his or her parents. Children need love almost as much as they need oxygen. The amount of love that a child receives, especially in his or her formative years, is the critical determinant of how healthy and happy he or she becomes as an adult. How children spell love. How does a child spell love? Time. Children determine how valuable and important they are and develop their self esteem and self worth by measuring the amount of time that the most important people in their life spend with them when they are young. There is no substitute for time, and once gone, you cannot make it up. Perhaps the greatest regret reported by parents is that I didn't spend enough time with my child when he or she was young. When you become a parent, you must discipline yourself and organize your life so you can spend ample time with your child throughout his or her growing years. You must discipline yourself to cut back, reduce, downsize, and eliminate other activities that prevent you from being an excellent parent. A wake up call. Some years ago, a good friend of mine got married. He was an avid golfer and he regularly played golf 5 times a week, often flying south in the winter for golf vacations when his local golf courses were covered with snow. Within 4 years of marrying, he and his wife had 4 children. Nonetheless, he still tried to play golf several times a week, taking time off from his business during the week and playing on weekends. Finally, his wife confronted him and told him that he was not spending enough time with his young children. His golf was taking up too many hours that would be better spent at home with her and with the children, especially during their most vulnerable and sensitive years. He suddenly realized that his life had changed. The things that he could do when he was single were no longer possible when he had young children. Being highly responsible and self disciplined, we immediately cut back his golf to once per week and rechanneled his time and energy into his family. He told me later that it made an extraordinary difference to his marriage and to his relationships with his young children. Setting new priorities. When you get married, your life goes through a major shift. Your lifestyle changes, and many of your common activities lose their importance and urgency. When your first child is born, your life shifts again. It often feels as if the first stage of your life, your youth, has dropped off, like the first stage of a rocket, and you are now on a different trajectory in life. In fact, it is not uncommon for couples to change their lives completely when their first child is born. They cut back or discontinue many of their previous social activities. They stop dining and drinking with friends, and they stop going out socially on the weekends. They begin to build a different life together around their home and children. The children become the focus of their time and attention. The children become the primary subject of their conversations. Responsible parents approach child rearing is as the most important part of their lives. They plan and organize their time and activities so they can fulfill their responsibility at a high level. Long term thinking. Children force you to think long term. When you realize that everything that you do or fail to do with your children in their formative years will have a lasting impact for generations to come, you become far more thoughtful and sensitive to the things you say and the way you treat them. When you are young and single, you can let it all hang out. You can blow up, get angry, express your feelings freely, and be your own person. But when you have a child, you need to impose a higher level of discipline and self control on yourself. Children are hypersensitive to the influence of their parents during their formative years. They see and experience each word and reaction of their parents, and they incorporate those words and actions into their world view and self image. In almost every case, when you see a dysfunctional adult, you can trace it back to dysfunctional parenting. When that dysfunctional adult was a child, their parents did or said things to them that hurt them, confused them, scared them, and created within them feelings of insecurity, anger, and inferiority. The greatest gift is love. The greatest gift you can give children is to let them know that you love them 100% of the time and that your love for them never changes, no matter what happens. There is no greater blessings for children than to know with complete confidence that the most important people in their life, their parents, love them completely and accept them totally, no matter what they do or what mistakes they take. Children are not little adults. They do not have the ability to make good judgments about the right or wrong things to do. It takes them many years of trial and error and sometimes bitter experience to develop the wisdom and judgment that enable them to make good decisions for themselves and their futures. The kindest way to treat your children when they make mistakes is to behave with calmness and compassion and to help them learn the lessons contained in the problem or difficulty. Discipline versus development. Many parents think that their job is to discipline their children by punishing them when they make a mistake. Back in the 1930s, when my parents were growing up, it was generally taught that the job of the parent was to break the will of the child. This philosophy led to a generation of broken children whose parents felt that it was their duty to mold them and shape them into little people that their parents found to be acceptable. But the fact is that each child is unique and different from all other people in the world. Each child comes into this world with his or her unique temperament, personality, and natural learnings toward different interests and activities. Parents are often amazed to see that each of their children is very different from each other child, even though they come from the same parents and grow up in the same household. In my experience, each child marches to the beat of a different drummer. No matter what you do to or for them, they have their own special destiny. They are going to grow up with a particular personality and they will be attracted to particular people and activities. Your main job is to create an environment in which they feel safe and confident enough to follow their inner promptings and personal inclinations. Question your beliefs. A philosopher once said, before I had children, I had four philosophies about raising children. Now I have four children with no philosophies. Each child is different from any other child and from any other person. When raising your children, be prepared to question your most cherished beliefs about what they should or should not do, say, or be. Above all, be prepared to admit that you could be wrong because you are going to make more mistakes than you can imagine. Perhaps the most important responsibility you have as a parent is to instill values in your children, especially the value of self discipline. One of the most common desires that parents have for their children is to raise them with a sense of self responsibility and self control. Parents want their children to be self disciplined and to practice self mastery and self denial, or the ability to delay gratification. Set a good example. Albert Schweitzer once wrote, you must teach men at the school of example, for they will learn at no other. The most powerful influence you have on your children is the example that you set for them all the time that they are growing up. Your children are always watching you out of the corners of their eyes. or from other room. They take everything in. They measure and analyze your behaviors, especially when you are under stress. By watching the way you behave, especially when you are angry or upset, or when they have made a mistake, they develop a clear picture for themselves of how adults are supposed to behave in the world. Your example sets the standard that they consider to be the normal way that adults act in various circumstances, especially when under stress. Your children, if they admire and respect your example, will strive to emulate you while they are growing up and then continuing on for the rest of their life. Perhaps the best question you can ask yourself over and over is, what kind of a family would my family be if everyone in it were just like me? Be a role model. When you practice self discipline and self control, especially when you feel angry or upset, your children absorb the lesson. Later, when they are angry or upset, they will practice self discipline and self control as well. In a recent study, researchers concluded that children form their idea of the world by watching how their mother deals with the ups and downs of daily life. If their mother seems calm, relaxed, and in control, children amused that this is a logical and rational world, so they are much more likely to practice calmness and self control themselves. If their mother seems to be frustrated, angry, or overwhelmed by too much to do and too little time, children absorb the world view that life is confused and stressful. Building character. The most important job you have as a parent is to instill values and to build character in your children. You do this by teaching them what values are important, especially those of integrity and truth telling. You set yourself up as a role model and demonstrate the values you want your children to have in every situation where those values are called for. Because the core value of character is integrity, the most important value that you instill in your children is truthfulness. Much of the shock of most parents' children lie. When they are growing up, they don't tell the truth. They tell both little and big lies. Often, this comes as a surprise to a parents who feel that somehow they must have failed their children on little way. But don't worry, lying is a normal and natural part of childhood. It is a form of communication that children are trying out on you to see if it works. If children find that telling lies is an effective way to get the things they want quickly and easily, they will lie on a regular basis. For example, I once asked my son Michael a question, and he gave me an answer that I knew was completely untrue. I asked him, Michael, why did you say that? You know that's a barefaced lie. Michael, who was 10-year-old at the time, answered candidly, well, I just thought I had given it a try. Children will give lying a try to see if it works. It, if it doesn't, they will try something else, and that Something else is usually telling the truth. Always tell the truth. One day, my wife and I read a question in a book on child raising, which said, if your children lie to you, who has made them afraid to tell the truth? That was a real eye opener for us. We immediately sat down with our children and told them, from now on, always tell the truth. We promise you that you will never get into trouble for telling the truth. If you tell a lie, we will be upset and you will be punished. But if you tell the truth, you will always be okay with us. From that day onward, with few expectations, our children tried us out with the truth. Over time, they got into a habit of telling the truth no matter what it was. And we kept our promise. We never punished our children for telling the truth. One day, as we were sitting around the family dinner table, one of our children was talking about his friend who had told him to lie to us about something he was planning to do. My son said, I told him that I never lied to my parents. His friend said, everyone lies to their parents. My son repeated, I never lied to my parents because I don't have. I can always tell them the truth and everything will be okay. Our three children listened to this and they all agreed. They told us that this was a great family because they never had to lie to their parents. The foundation of self confidence. When children tell the truth, they grow up straight and strong with high self esteem and high levels of self confidence. They have higher levels of self respect and personal pride. They look you straight in the eye and tell you exactly what they are thinking and feeling. They are very different from children who must continually lie or shade the truth in order to get things past their parents. In raising your children, there will be countless times when they will do or say something which you disapprove of or which makes you angry. During these times, you must discipline yourself to think before you act or react, controlling yourself and your temper. You must remind yourself that what you do in a moment of stress is registered and recorded by your child and can have an effect on him or her for an indefinite period into the future. Children learn values by teaching and example given to them repeatedly while they are growing up. When you teach them values and personally practice the values of love, especially for your spouse, compassion for those who are less fortunate, generosity with those who need it, patience when it is required, tolerance for different viewpoints, courage in the face of difficulties, and perseverance in the face of setbacks, your children will adopt these behaviors as norms. They will see them as the appropriate way to respond to these kinds of situations as they grow up. The power of forgiveness. One of the most important of all values that you teach your children is forgiveness. The inability to forgive lies at the root of most negative emotions. When you practice forgiveness, when you freely let things go, your children grow up with the ability to forgive as well. This saves them from years of unhappiness as the result of someone hurting them in some way, which will always happen. My parents were adamant and inflexible. They had low self esteem as the result of difficult depression era childhoods. As a result, once they had taken a position on any subject, however wrong, they could never back down and admit that they were wrong. I resolved that when I had children, I would do exactly the opposite. From now, the time my daughter Christina was a little girl, if I shouted at her for any reason, I would always go to her and apologize. I would say, I should not have shouted at you. I was wrong. Will you forgive me? When you raise children, they will make countless mistakes while they are growing up. Sometimes you will overlook, unless you are a saint. This is almost impossible for you not to do. However, whenever you make a mistake with your child, you should have the courage and compassion to realize that destructive criticism from a parent is extremely painful to a child. Go and take it back. Apologize and ask your children for forgiveness. Even if the child has misbehaved, this does not justify reacting in a negative and hurtful way toward your child. Just say, I apologize. Will you forgive me? And and they always will. The minute you apologize and ask your children to forgive you for anything that you may have done to hurt them, you liberate them from feelings of negativity or inferiority. By taking it back, you allow them to be happy and confident once more. Teaching your children is never ending. Developing proper values and teaching proper conduct to your children is a lifelong job. You cannot give a single lecture on truthfulness and compassion and then forget about it. You must repeat the lesson by discussion and example over and over, year after year, all the time while your children are with you. In a letter to Miss Manners, a parent asks, how long does it take to teach my children table manners? No matter what I say, it seems that my children still eat in an unmannered and disorganized way. Miss Manners responded by saying, be patient. It takes about 15 minutes of continual repetition to teach your children table manners. And even then, there are no guarantees that your instructions will be successful. Be their role model. Of course, if you want your children to behave in a certain way, you must model that method of behavior continually year after year. If you want your children to dress properly, you must dress properly. If you want your children to groom themselves properly, you must groom yourself properly as well. If you want your children to be organized and efficient, you must show them the way by being organized and efficient yourself. Remember each day that your children are going to be have the way that you behave for the rest of their lives. When you think like this, it forces you to practice higher levels of self discipline and self control, knowing that the consequences of your behaviors are going to affect your children's chances in life many years from now. The discipline of raising children so that they grow up with high self esteem, being positive and confident in themselves and their own value is one of the most important things you ever do. The results of your childrening will last you all the years of your life. Action exercises. First, what two qualities would you like your children to identify with you by observing your behavior? Second, what two qualities would you like most to instill in your children and how could you achieve this? Third, if you were an excellent role model for your children, how would your behaviors be different starting today? Fourth, what mistakes have your children made that you should forgive and forget about, starting immediately? Fifth, what actions are you going to take immediately to spend more time with your children? Sixth, what actions could you take to instill the quality of truthfulness in your children? 7. How could you encourage and reward your children so that they practice greater self discipline, self control, and self mastery?